Thanks for coming out this morning on a Wednesday. I know it's rough. What is this, day 8 of NAB? Um, we are Asteria. We're a new Neo studio based in LA. And we're going to take you through some of our methodology, some of our workflows, and how we arrived on building out a tool set, which is being powered by AWS. So I'm Paul Trillo. I'm a filmmaker and have been playing with all sorts of technology for my entire career, always from an experimental standpoint, always out of curiosity, and have arrived at using AI tools early, even going back to 2016. And I've always thought of it as a way to like push the kinds of things that can be made. Technology can like open up new creative concepts. And so when I first looked at AI, it wasn't about like replicating the old, it was about what new could be done. And eventually locked arms with the people at Asteria, Ben, Michel, and Justin over here. And yeah, I think we all kind of came together from a shared philosophy of trying to bring this technology in to the film industry in a responsible way, in a way where the industry wouldn't bottom out, and to kind of carry on the tradition of animation, live action production, VFX, and see how we can marry the sort of old way of doing things with the new way of doing things. So yeah, that's me.
And I'm Ben Michel, one of the co-founders as well. Um, when we came together to build Asteria, it was sort of to create a bit of a a safe haven for filmmakers, artists, that were seeing AI looming and posing an existential threat to their not just their craft but their livelihoods. And so we all came together kind of motivated by that same fear or apprehension about the technology, but realizing that there would be a way, there could be a way to sort of build it in a way that was for artists and for filmmaking, and like other moments in history in filmmaking, use technology to kind of expand what was possible. And so we went out and found a ragtag group of filmmakers that were circuit bending AI in really interesting ways. And the last 2 years have really been about kind of attacking novel problem solving for animation, VFX, in interesting ways, and kind of where we've arrived today and why we're here, thanks to Croy and others from AWS, is that a lot of the synthesization of those findings are what we're building products around. And so we're actually building products that are informed first and foremost by our challenges in production, but trying to propagate those into the broader Hollywood and filmmaking ecosystem is sort of one of our core objectives here, so that we as an industry can move forward in a time of great uncertainty, with this technology, sort of empowering us rather than, wiping us out.
Yeah, I think the way we like to talk about ourselves, is this coming through? There we go. The way we like to think about ourselves is we are both a startup, but we're a startup led by artists, which I think is something that's fundamentally new. And we're trying to do everything from like an artist first perspective and a filmmaker first perspective. So that means training our own custom models. Last year, we partnered with Moon Valley to develop a clean video model. So a video model not trained on anything stolen or scraped, but all licensed material. And to also train custom models working with artists doing original artwork and having kind of that authorship and the fingerprints of the artist kind of extend through the project rather than kind of recycling whatever's in the data set of an AI model. So here's a few of our projects before we get into some of the other stuff. This is actually more of a case study for something we actually can't show you, but this is our sort of our proxy version. I don't know, Ben, if you want to talk about this.
Yeah, so one thing that we found really early on was that AI, the constant refrain around AI was it lacked consistency and control, and so that's what we tried to solve for. This is actually something that we're patenting, which is 3D cell animation. And we found very early on that if you actually just hand drew animation in a very rudimentary way, it was actually a very powerful substrate for how you could control motion. What you're seeing here is basically what started off with simple 2D animation, that we can actually dimensionalize into 3D and frame by frame, reproduce it so that we can move cameras, we can apply different shading to it. And you can see that we can do really interesting things that you wouldn't really be able to do with a 3D asset, a 3D rig. And so what this is kind of a basis for, and I think, you'll see in many of our projects, it's really about, making sure that there's an artist that's guiding that. But, in this case, it took an animator less than a day to produce the base, 2D animation for this. To have done this in a traditional 3D pipeline would have taken, many, many days or weeks to accomplish. And so it's about finding efficiency. And so this is kind of the way that, and then building tooling around these functionalities. So, and you'll see later with the product suite that we're building, it's to enable artists, to take some of the manual kind of AI legwork out of this and really just allow them to draw, fluidly in full 3D environments like this.
Yeah, I think what I love about this is that it's not necessarily using AI to do something faster and cheaper, that it's actually enabling us to think differently. So the method of production is actually changing rather than just to lower costs or to do something that cuts people out of the process. It's more about how do we like hack these new tools together to create something entirely new, like an entirely new workflow. So that's more what we're interested in. Let's see. Let me turn this down. Is less about again, less about, how do we reduce budgets and more about how do we like expand the types of work we do and how do we increase the production value. This is a project I did last year. We released it last year. This is the first thing I did with Asteria when I was still a freelance filmmaker, freelance director, not knowing that I was going to be under a roof for the next couple years. And this is where we kind of like, found this shared philosophy in working together. So this project landed on my lap and I brought it to Asteria. And I think we both kind of shared this love for traditional 2D animation, 3D animation, and how do we like combine those traditions and those artists with working in this new tool set. So worked with an artist named Paul Flores who designed the kind of original look, this kind of like stippled ink R. Crumb inspired artwork, and then worked with 5 2D animators to design the animation, the transitions, the character work, and then used AI for asset generation for kind of a post rendering process that kind of brings Paul Flores' style back. And I think that kind of that workflow of starting with original art, original storyboards, that kind of, tradition into custom model training on that original art, into asset generation, then back to animation, then AI as a finishing tool. That kind of extends throughout all of our projects.
Yeah, and I would just add with this project, we put this of making a video of this out in the world. It went super viral. And the inbound, feedback that we got from the animation community, people who had worked on like Lion King and, kind of classical Disney animation, all felt like this is a way that's interesting, that's not scared to use AI, and felt like the first time that they were seeing things that, would represent the technology, the use of the technology in a way that felt, empowering to them. People always ask us like, oh, well, how much money do you save on this? It's when you see the finished piece, the level of detail is so intricate that you just never would have even made. If you compare the fidelity of this to like a like a King of the Hill or Simpsons, that's usually very simple. And so in many ways it's about how could we use the technology to explore a much more
New aesthetics.
Yeah, exactly.
New aesthetics and kind of increasing production value. This is another project we'll just watch a small clip of. This is the last time we were in Vegas. We worked with Aston Martin and CoreWeave to bring to life the Aston Martin vehicle in a kind of new in F1 racing in these kind of surreal environments. The theme was going places where roads don't exist, and this again shows something similar to the Kuko process, but an entirely different aesthetic, which is shooting miniatures. So all of the 3D actually started out as miniature models. We then tracked it in a 3D environment, got a sort of ground truth for the motion, and then used AI as a sort of render engine. So this was also done with the Mary model. So a clean foundation. We then trained on Aston Martin F1 racing footage from the past year and created this original LoRa model. That LoRa model then gets kind of paired with a series of keyframes. So the other unique thing here is not just kind of the rendering, but also being able to place multiple keyframes on a timeline. So I could say this happens at frame 0, this happens at frame 12, this happens at frame 34 and 72, and it'll kind of hit those landmarks there. So it's sort of a new way of thinking about rendering.
Yeah, and I think and you'll see at the end here when we get into the products, you'll start to see the fingerprints of, especially this project, on the way that we thought about the project. It necessitated a productization layer in order to do this type of keyframing where we wanted to extract and be surgical with particular imagery. And I think that's kind of, when we get into some of the tooling that we look at, it's about, being surgical, giving, artists a scalpel when they're used to, AI only offers a hammer. And so I think, you'll see when we get to the product that this is sort of all these products have been synthesizing, how we think about our, the continuum suite, which we'll see in a moment.
Yeah, the tooling, which we'll get into, is really about how do we scale this now that we've done all these kind of experimental workflows. How do we scale this for a feature length film or a TV series? So that's sort of the evolution here. I'm going to show the real quick, just so you can kind of get a breadth of the different aesthetics and projects that we're working on.
They said it couldn't be done. But impossibility is just a moment before inevitability. Now, ghosts live inside our machines. The laws of nature do not resist, only wait to be understood. Impossibility is not a wall, only a choice unmade. The future remains an uncharted course. It is for us to decide where to go.
So yeah, that's a glimpse at both some of the projects we've done and are in development, as well as some of our tooling. So this is sort of how we think about, both functioning as a production company and studio, as well as people building tools and creating software, which sounds like two different businesses, but I think the studio of the future it's all one thing, where you can see how the learnings, like Ben was saying, feed into the tools that we need. The tools that we need then feed into making our productions better and scaling those productions. I don't know if you want to add anything to this kind of mindset.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of this is also conversations that we're having with studios who are also obviously eager to adopt the technology, but lack a orchestration layer between how to access, the advanced AI workflows and also the compute, which is what we're working closely with AWS on, is how do we, kind of link those things together in interesting ways. And so, again, it is that feedback loop, and whether we're doing it for our own productions or we're being approached by major film studios to attack specific problems, the goal is to make sure that the product reflects a way to scale those workflows inside of institutions that have thousands of people working on, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of film slate that need this technology desperately. So
yeah, I think we saw an opportunity there where some of the out of the box or black box AI tools are not necessarily designed for film studios. One, in the fact that they're not necessarily secure environments, and as well as they're just not premium enough. They're kind of based in a very simplistic way of how films are made, And films are very complex. They're very complicated and annoying to make. And I think the tech industry tends to oversimplify how complicated and intricate and collaborative films are to make. And so we saw an opportunity there to provide something that delivers on something more premium and more detailed, lets people get more surgical, as well as find ways where AI can be applied to film production that don't necessarily mean even image and video pixel generation on screen, but how can we think about agents and a network of agents to help accelerate and streamline production. So I'll show you that kind of tees up Continuum, which is, again, this is AWS is helping us build this out. This will be something that we're going to be rolling out and piloting on a few co-productions that we have with the studios. And then after we kind of go through this pilot series, we're going to scale it out to both independent filmmakers and enterprise.
A story is kinetic, continually evolving, and sometimes a bit chaotic. What if you could transform that chaos into harmony? What if a single document could create an entire universe? Continuum expands the DNA of your story into a living constellation, an operating system for your production that allows you to freely flow from development to post-production. After your materials are loaded, it breaks down every character, location, world-building element into a continually synced relational database. Collaborate. Assign tasks, auditions, fittings, VFX reviews, scouting, and at the center of it all, Atlas, your personal production assistant, helping you navigate your project's universe and answer any and every question you have along the way. Now, let's get to work. Start with your script, write, rewrite, review, then turn it into a radio play.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Ready to shot list? Easy. Outline your shots right on the page. Continuum analyzes the context, identifying the location, the character, dialogue, and props. That metadata carries through every step of the process. Want to turn that shot list into a storyboard? It's already laid out. Sketch it, color it, change the angle. Turn the board into an animatic. Edit the timing. And if you have a new idea, you can change the script here and it updates it there. Changes automatically propagate throughout the entire project. Turn that vision into a schedule. Track it in a budget. Make it a plan, a call sheet, a reality. Everything in one place and everyone on the same page. From your first idea to your final frame, the continuity of your vision remains intact.
So that's our sort of production suite that is focused on everything from development carrying through into production. We're then working on what post-production looks like, as well as a layer that even sits above that, which would be a whole studio management system. So like large asset management, project management, and agentic workflow building, where you can actually speak to an AI agent to help you problem solve, help you develop custom workflows, comfy UI workflows, build even custom nodes. So that kind of sits on top. That's called Leap. And then the produce aspect is what you just saw, which applies to, what you could see how this could apply to physical production and things that are not even necessarily AI productions. And then the next piece is what we're calling Continuum Create, which is something that is more AI generative video native. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that and how, again, some of our workflows filtered into the Create product.
I think that's what I was alluding to earlier, was sort of the necessitation of a UI for executing some of these things. If you're familiar with the technology and you see the way that people interact with, synthesizing white paper research into, comfy UI nodes, or, only interacting with it through a command line. The idea was to give an artist an interface, which I think has been a steep barrier for entry to most artists to interact with the deeper the deeper layers of the technology, and so we want to expose those to artists with a familiar interface. So obviously you'll see a lot of inspiration from a lineage from Adobe to other popular DCCs, and we recognize that there's a pattern of usage that I think visual artists like to, as visual artists use the tools in a way that maybe is not how current tooling exists around the AI generative image and video products.
Yeah. So this was designed as a way to speak to people that are familiar with post-production tools versus like, even something as simple as like a text box. So we'll play the video and then we'll give you a glimpse at what's coming right after that.
This is how you make an AI video today. You type something in a box, pull the slot machine, and hope for the best. It's boring, it's random, and did you really make that? Enter Continuum Create, the first AI editing platform built for filmmakers by filmmakers. Continuum Create lets you name your project. The shot panel allows you to name and prompt your shots. The library is where you store all your video and still media. Presets and LoRa's allow you to keep your generations consistent. And a clean canvas and timeline keeps you focused. Start by designing your shot. Pull your creative ammunition from the library and drop it into the timeline. This is where Continuum Create stops being a generator and becomes an editor. You can scrub, trim, and create transitions with your video clips all seamlessly in one timeline. You can control video to video in multiple ways. Pose transfer lets you use real actors to sculpt a performance. Depth control gives you compositional consistency for style transfers. Motion transfer lets you mimic motion from any video. Continuum Create allows you to add unlimited keyframes to your timeline. Edit precise moments in your video with style frames, giving you temporal control over actions, characters, and style changes throughout your clip. Double-click to open up the style frame editor, where you can import your own imagery or use an image editor to generate a new frame. With style frames, you're not re-rolling the dice. You're giving a specific frame accurate direction. Want to change the time period? Control the weather? How about changing their shirt? Or change the person? You can also transform your video with up to 4 reference images. So what if you have a note? Drag your output back into the timeline, select the area you want to adjust, make your changes, and then regenerate. Okay, now what if you want to change the camera angle? Use camera control to retarget your camera angle and movement. Now let's introduce something new to the story. Sketch to video allows you to draw and compose the frame exactly how you want it. Then, with trajectory control, you can create motion paths for up to 25 layers of objects, characters, or even the camera itself. With Continuum Create, draw the motion, transform the background, change the angle, expand the frame, extend the shot. Organize your project and share with your team all in one place. By combining these tools and capabilities, Continuum Create gives you an unprecedented level of control and consistency. When building the tools of the future, it's important that they are made by filmmakers for filmmakers. Your creative journey is now truly infinite.
I think one thing that's worth mentioning about the way that we think about the whole architecture of this is that it is intended to be especially as we look at enterprise as sort of our first area of focus in studios. Unlike I think a lot of products that kind of push people into using their compute ecosystem, this is all intended to draw in and layer into kind of owned compute or compute commitments that exist already inside of studios. And there's versions of this that can be run locally, and so the idea really was to build something that was a very nimble architecture that could take in not just APIs from other providers, but also reflect the preferences of a customer or client to support these functionalities within their own compute ecosystems. And so that is an interesting way that we think about the product and how we deploy it. And I think that the business model itself necessitates having 4 deployed elements so that we have a layer of customization around the preferences of our studios or our partners.
Yeah, and it feels like this is like a big apple that we're taking a bite out of. But I do believe that the reason why we're approaching it in this way is that app integration is where all these tools get better. So rather than jumping between 4 different apps to do one thing, having it all centralized in one place. So one, you can work better, but also you can collaborate with your team better, and you actually benefit from more data you put into your project. The smarter that project gets. So that relates to the agentic side of this. So whether you're feeding it an outline, a show bible, a script, even storyboards and concept art, the more that you kind of enrich your project with data, the smarter it's going to be and the more assistive it's going to be. And having all those tools kind of interconnected creates a way better work stream, so that if I do make this change in the script, or if I do update the storyboards here, then everyone knows the storyboards are updated. Or if we lose this location and have to change locations, the ripple effects are automatic and dynamic. And to be able to go and, a script and shot list are essentially the metadata for an entire film or TV show. That's where the metadata starts. And so this is about like being able to continue that data flow from that script or that shot list into the animatic, into what's shot in camera, into like what's delivered at the end. And to be able to have all of that data be able to be called up at any moment. So whether you're in the app continuum, or you are even on your phone, we're working on a way to have this be assistive, even via text message, or calling it on a phone number, or within an app interface. But this is kind of a glimpse at the different agents that we're designing for different use cases. So we have things that help with scripts, script problems. If you make a change here, there'll be ripple effects. You say like, oh, let's delete this scene. There'll be a script agent that'll call out, oh, okay, if you delete this scene, these ripple effects will create plot holes or whatever. A scheduling agent that can look at the script, it can look at the locations, and it can kind of intelligently help assistant director plan out the shoot. Anything from like a PA agent. So the production assistant doesn't have to bother, the production manager to say, oh, what are we shooting tomorrow? Or where's the location? Having an agent that you could literally text message, and it'll give you the call sheet. It'll give you the location. It'll give you the storyboards instantly. And a budget agent. So it knows, it's looking at the script, it's looking at the schedule, and it's kind of dynamically adjusting the budget and helping simulate multiple budget scenarios as you're kind of in script development. So yeah, and in the way we're thinking about this is that Atlas is kind of the nucleus that ties all those products together, whether we're looking at the create tool, or the produce tool, or the leap. Atlas, is the kind of I don't know, it's the sort of sage that you can kind of speak to at any moment, and that should be available no matter where you are. And the way we want to think about this in the future is not forcing people onto this platform, but being able to meet people where they are. So whether they want to continue working in the prior tools, like having all that data that is being created, whether it's in Final Draft or Movie Magic, or you're working in Maya, having all those assets and all those data pipes streamlined to one singular place. And being able to kind of query anything. So you could have the canon of your creative, so the canon of the TV series, the canon of the actual film production, and be able to ask it questions. So that's where we're at. And again, thank you all for coming on a Wednesday morning. I know it's tough to roll out, so appreciate it. And come speak to us after if you have any questions.